Good day, all. This is Matt Peters, and I have Greg Bunce with me. We're both from Utah, of course, the Utah Geospatial Resource Center. And today we want to present on mining new users. Doesn't that sound exciting? So as we kind of look into the future, I always reflect back to what is UGRC's mission statement. And I think that all of us have to do that same thing is what is our mission statement? Ours is to facilitate and promote GIS in the state of Utah. And so I keep thinking now, okay, we got to do that. So we got to look for some non-traditional users to do that with. We have to listen to them intently, and they may never purchase any GIS software. However, they will need to do GIS at some point. They may not know it yet. And so I think that it's chasing after these new users is very important, and that we shouldn't get caught up in the situation of, well, we just go to where the money is. Remember, we're trying to do something bigger. So let's moving on from that. I think you got to remember GIS is just a tool. And I think you really got to let that sink in. It's a tool. A lot of us come from that time of when we had GIS as a career. And so thinking of it as a tool is a little different. And our goal now is to make sure that our data and services are part of the fabric of government when we think about that promoting GIS. And so I look back in the mirror and I say, well, are we the silo? Are we the problem? We're not trying to make people GIS professionals. We're kind of mining our fellow geospatial souls, finding those lost souls that want to know about geospatial. But anyway, I think the bigger question is, how can we be part of the fabric of government, just like the computer on your desk? Can we really get GIS to be at that level? And I think you got to ask yourself, well, what does that mean? Often on the GIS side of the house, we have, all of us has some kind of a geospatial clearinghouse. And I think that, like in Utah, I think there's a definite disadvantage for the tabular side, not having a centralized database of data. It's almost something weird, like GIS people are hardwired to collaborate, kind of different. But so I think you ask yourself, what is success for GIS in your state? Are you aiming too low? GIS isn't GIS until you give it away. Anyway, so let's move on to the next then. So we have all our usual suspects, natural resources, they're big users. So where do we go looking for new folks? Have you guys ever just went out and looked at your state website? There's so many hints on a state website about who might be messing with data. UGRC, we made a video about ourselves. If you have some control of your budget, have you kind of created a little fund where you kind of call it curiosity dollars? And then I know, like Tim in North Carolina, he spends time listening to other agencies in state government, and he really listens with that idea that, yeah, he's not thinking about what the comeback is, just listening and understanding what their needs are. It can seem very easy for us GIS people. We're in our world. We think, yeah, why wouldn't someone use GIS to investigate insurance fraud at the state level? However, when you speak to those folks and you start to understand what their caseload is, the procedures they have to go through in that caseload, you realize that actually GIS can play a very small role in that effort. But you need to figure out how to connect with them even for that little role. A real challenge can just be figuring out who to speak with. Okay, so let's talk more about that. If we remember from the last slide, yeah, we're just talking about, yeah, we always talk to folks we know, real easy, our longtime allies. Well, this is probably a time where they can just take care of themselves for a while, and we just work on them with them in larger issues. So seeking people out that are not in our circles is the challenge. Who's the data scientists in your state? When you think about like people looking at different types of fraud, oftentimes fraud kind of not, how would you put it? Fraud begets fraud. Like neighborhoods can be involved in fraud together, or relatives involved in fraud together. So by having a location for these folks, it allows them to kind of see that pattern. Of course, every agency, every potential partner, different needs. Think about at the big picture, you're building a whole community across the state. A community has many folks, many strengths and weaknesses, and our approaches cannot all be the same when we're dealing with them. So let's move on from there and talk about a little bit about on the software side. When you think about the progression of GIS folks, from ArcInfo days, or if you really want to be silly, from the PIOS days, the Polygon Information Overlay System. Now there's ArcGIS Online, kind of going from hard to use, easy to use. And you think of your own life, things that you do, where it's easy, where there's a low barrier to entry, you're probably going to do it. Where there's a lot of prep work, not so much. We need to make things easy for folks, but we need to make them easy even for GIS users. So Greg, I've been talking for quite a while. Maybe you can lead out on this next one.
Okay, I was actually just getting a little relaxed. I was going to sip another cup of tea, but okay, I'll jump in.
Okay.
So this is a great segue into our new product, the desktop web API, or the API client, really what it should say. But if you remember back, or if you were at our Albuquerque and attended our Albuquerque session where we presented on basically the idea that you're thinking beyond the map, thinking about non-traditional GIS users and how we could reach out to them, and maybe they're not always looking for a map. So taking some of that thought back to the office and seeing where we could go with that. This is one of those. This is one of the things that we came up with. So what this is it's essentially a geocoding product that is designed for anyone who can operate a spreadsheet and throw some addresses in a spreadsheet. The goal when creating it was that it was extremely user-friendly, so basically very intuitive, that it was cross-platform, so it works on a Mac and a Windows operating system. There's no license in the back end to get caught up with. And then it stays update. You don't have to worry about going out and searching for updates. The application itself will actually, on the back end, keep itself updated. And then it's plug and play. You install it once and you're ready to go. And the other idea with drag and drop is that you can take your CSV files and you just drop them into this thing, and suddenly you've got locations. So you can read more about it on our blog post listed there, and then the code is there on the GitHub site. But this was really a way of this was a win-win. This was a win for the non-traditional users and the traditional GIS users. So this is a quick screenshot of it. And this is literally the entire application right here. You're seeing it in front of you. It gives you some information on how to set this up, or what it's expecting, such as house number, the prefix, the street name, and how it wants to see it. And then you feed in this CSV spreadsheet here, which is as simple as that. And then quite quickly, you get an output file here, also in CSV. And as you can see in the lower right-hand corner, it gives you the XY coordinates that it mapped it to. It gives you the score, and then it gives you the match address that it found in the system. So a few enhancements coming in the future, one being the biggest one, is that we are looking to add where you can basically do a point and poly query, pass in, we have a list of, in the state geographic information data source, we have a list, of polygon layers such as voting precincts, city boundaries, counties, you name it. Giving the user the opportunity to say, yes, add these fields as well, and tell me what districts those are in. We're excited about that. This looks like it's back to you, Matt.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, the thing that threw me when my colleagues were showing me this tool, I said, okay, you can geocode. Yeah, that's nice. And it gives you this XY. And then I was like, well, what the hell? Where do I go from there? And then they reminded me, yeah, some of the clients we're working with that can really take advantage of that tool, they have their own software, such as for Medicaid fraud, or people using Google Maps, or people looking at state of Utah unclaimed property. A lot of these other systems have ways of ingesting the XY data. So once you have an XY for the address, then they're home free. They can go do their thing on their own systems. And I think that's something that I had forgotten, because, I'm a GIS person. If you give me a point, I want to put it somewhere. Just bad habits, I guess. And so it's kind of like, we're providing this pollen, they're taking it back to the hive and dealing with it. They have functionality they can use, and we want them to do that. Just think about simply, we provide them a little piece and they can run with it. So Greg, I think that I'll send you back for the next slide.
All right, so I got to credit Matt for this title here. Gosh, golly, a golly. I thought that was pretty clever, and I rolled with that. But the idea here is that, when looking for new clients or looking to serve new folks in GIS, there's one angle where they don't really want to get involved with GIS at all. And we provide the API client there. They drop stuff in and get stuff out, and then they take it and they're on their way. I mean, another angle not to forget is helping grow folks in the field of GIS, and just getting them at first to crawl and eventually walk and so on. And we've had some pretty good success with this. But thinking back how it used to be versus how it is, we're able to do what we can do now because of things such as Eagle. So thinking back the old way, getting somebody set up, it was quite arduous. It was getting desktop installed on their system, and then, okay, now I want to make a map. Okay, now we got to figure out how to get ArcIMS going, or eventually later on ArcGIS server. And then this data sits on our server, and it kind of takes on a life of its own, and it creates technical debt. And before you know, we don't know who owns what on there. But now looking at where we're at today, and Eagle has made a huge difference and made this so much easy for folks, because now we can go to a few folks and say, hey, do you want to try out this thing called ArcGIS Online? We can share a license with you. You really don't have to do much. We'll give you a login. You jump in. It's fairly intuitive. And before you know it, they're starting to crawl, they're starting to walk. And then one of the patterns we've noticed is that, they'll come back and say, well, how can I put geocoding in there? Or, well, one of the progressions seems to be, then they might want to try it on a desktop because they want some more functionality. So then we'll get them set up in Pro and get a license. And we can do that all through ArcGIS Online, which is pretty simple. Again, painless for them, low barrier to entry. The next thing they'll say is, I got some data. How can I geocode this? And then, now we're starting to run, and they start asking about analysis. Well, how do I cluster these? How do I cluster these address points that I just geocoded? And now how do I show them on a map? And before you know it, they're at the point of almost flying, because now they want to make this map. They want to share it with folks. They want it to be a web map, and we're back into ArcGIS Online, sharing, and they're familiar in that environment. And now suddenly, we've really helped them out. They're a GIS user. And there's a couple of cases in the States. So the State Preservation Office here was one of those success stories where we started out really with the crawl with them. And now they are successfully on their own, running their own GIS, have their own license. Another situation right now is with the human services group, and they're kind of in the run stage where they're still using a license of ours, but they're exploring moving on and getting their own because they're wanting to share some data within their agency. Some of it's sensitive. So that's putting them in the boat where they're thinking, okay, well, maybe we need to get our own license so we can have our own, ArcGIS Online account where we can have our own secure data over here. So that's kind of just something not to forget, is that there are other ways to reach out to these folks. And sometimes it starts literally with a crawl, but now it's easier to get folks advanced and move through the system with things such as ArcGIS Online.
That's very true. Yeah, I think that's a real key, just the simplicity of these tools. And I think about agencies and I try to seek out the ones that have data with a location. That's where we use our curiosity money. But I think that you got to kind of find a balance. Realize that not every agency is going to use GIS every day, but we all need it sometime. And it's kind of like for our Medicaid fraud people, we did some geocoding for them. They were happy. They were able to take that and use it. And then we won't see them for a while. Same with the unclaimed property division of the Treasurer's Office. We just finished a 500,000 geocode run for them. We won't see them for another year. But there may be other questions that come up that we can help them with. So we're trying to slowly change a whole culture. And it's not something that happens overnight, but let's move on to the next one. So, just to reiterate again, yeah, it's like we oftentimes, as people, we don't go outside of the folks who speak our language. And so we got to figure out how can we be like the chatty Cathy, make maps for people. Shelby's office does that for people being elected, takes them a map, gives them information. We do blog posts, got to chat with folks not in our circles, outside of our normal GIS community. So many good things can come of that. But I think that though, there is one thing we need to prepare for, and let's move on to the next one, Greg. It's that, yeah, there's some people that just don't respond, or they respond so slow you almost forget who the hell they are. But there is also that incremental, Greg gave us two examples, and one other example we have is fleet management for the state fleet cars, and just the whole general, any state agency or person that uses a state car. I was just sitting in a restaurant with a gentleman that was the head of fleet management, and we were talking bicycles and things and riding, and anyway, left that. A month later, he calls me up. He says, Matt, I've been thinking about you. I have a problem I think that your shop can help me solve. And we solved it for him. And then we continued to solve more things every few months for him until now we're fairly embedded with his agency, and he's since moved on, but there's other people in the agency that see the vision now, and we're definitely moving on with them. Greg, I think I'll turn it back to you.
So as we kind of look and we mine for these new users, Matt and I chat quite often about, the core data, what are we good at? What is our best service? And our best service really is our data and our services. So as we look to mine new users, we try to keep an eye on and keep focused on our foundation, which is our data and our services. And we look back, talking with Matt, you look back at our agency, AGRC, which it was at the time, back in the 80s. This is the time when they're building a lot of these data sets up, and they're looking for projects. They're out there looking for projects in other different departments and agencies And this data then starts to mature through these projects, because you need streets, and you need address points eventually, and you need county boundaries. So you start growing it through these projects. But now we're at a point where we have some foundational data that's very stable and it's very mature. So we're not necessarily looking for projects. We're looking to get users to use our products, our data, and our services. And we don't want to get stagnant with our data. We're looking for opportunities to grow this data. So we're looking for opportunities for folks to use the data, but we're also looking to get feedback from these users. And as we continue look for these new users, oftentimes our data matures and it grows. So you think about NextGen 911, there's all these quality checks now that go into maintaining the road center lines and the address points. And this data is only getting better because of this. And then elections and tax. I know Matt reached out to the folks over in tax, and they wanted to use the address points. And our data, because of that, has now gotten better. We have something called Blue Stakes 811 in the state. And they're the know before you dig. You're going to dig somewhere, you call them, and they're going to tell you, notify all the people around them. So they use our data, and we get a ton of feedback monthly from them on maybe areas that are missing data, or just general fixes that people are out in the field are knowing. So again, just reaching out to these folks, they're using the data, but our core data is continually advancing. And I kind of like the images on the right here, because we're focused on the top part there, the foundation and the data. But really, anybody could build what they want from there. You could build that skyscraper, and maybe that's NextGen 911, or you can build an election system, which is the beautiful house. You can build whatever you want on top of what we're providing, as long as we're focused on the core and the foundation of our data, and we don't lose sight of that. The API client was another great example of that. That came out of a curiosity with the Medicaid folks. And basically, they needed to geocode data, and they didn't want to use GIS stuff. We were able then, again, to lean back on our foundational data, build this geocoding client, and now we grew that through that opportunity. And now other folks, we're opening up that wide up for many other folks to use. And then Matt and I feel that the NSGIC Geo-enabled election program is kind of a good example of this, where you need all this foundational data, and then you can grow it, and the election system advances the data. Other folks can use it in the 911 world and tax, but just another way of keeping a focus on the core and the foundation of our data. So we talked a ton so far about non-traditional users, but we thought it was also important to point out that some of the traditional users that we service, we don't want to forget about them, and we're continually looking at ways to improve their experience as well. So again, geocoding is a typical request that we get when we put out feedback looking for areas. Geocoding is one thing that folks always need to use. Some folks in the office view that as the front door into GIS, which I would agree with. In the past, we've had a decent amount of services. So kind of that graph on the right, going from A to B, I think it was a little bit complex, but that's where we were. In the past, if you wanted to set up geocoding, there was the programming route, you needed API keys. We had some locator packages out there. You go, you download them, you put them in the right area, then you wire the application up, Python toolboxes, and we still offer these services, but they're a little bit for the savvy user. So looking at geocoding again, and looking at the wider array of GIS users, how can we lower that barrier to entry again for the non-savvy user who just wants to geocode but doesn't want to do all this? They want to get from A to B quickly on a straight line. So the answer to that is something we just released just really within the past couple of weeks, but been working on it for a while, is a project we call Masquerade. And what happens is, this is really another plug and play application for a GIS user who's going to be in ArcGIS Online, or they're going to be in using ArcGIS Pro. And essentially what it is this geocoding service that sits in ArcGIS Online, but on the back end, it uses our API geocoder. So it sends the query out to our API geocoder, but it goes through the interface of either ArcGIS Pro or ArcGIS Online. The user doesn't really need to know anything about this. they connect into either of these locations and say, yes, I want to use the masquerade locator. What's happening on the back end, and the beauty of it is, it's taking advantage of the geocoder and our data that we've been building up over time. And some of the reasons why you might want to use our specific geocoder is A, it's free. B, it's optimized for Utah addressing, so which is a little bit funky sometimes for folks. So there's an example here on the screen: 710 east, 300 south. That's a little bit awkward for a lot of folks to look at that address, because there's two numbers and there's two directionals. Well, sometimes folks switch those around. Our geocoder will kind of put some IntelliSense into the system, but also some checks that say, oh, well, 300 east and 710 south is not an address. Did you mean this? It's optimized to think like a Utah, I guess. And then there's pre-directions. We have pre-directions on most all of our data. However, locally, there's many situations where folks just don't use the pre-direction. And in fact, I don't even think they know what that pre-direction would be. Wasatch Boulevard is one. I don't think anybody would say South Wasatch Boulevard. In fact, I think it would just be awkward. So again, our geocoder is optimized to say, well, that's not necessary because there is no north. You can drop that. You can still get 100% score without providing stuff like that. Again, this is for the traditional GIS user who wants to plug in a little bit easier and take advantage of our services. You can check out this project on our GitHub page there. And yeah, I think we're back to Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Yeah, we talked a bunch about web service stuff, but I think that another key is with the kind of the explosion of databases and things that perhaps we think of as non-traditional, like not Oracle and not SQL Server. There's a lot happening, and we need to look out for folks that are using those too. And so we're kind of experimenting, looking into how can we load our data into BigQuery. Are there other DBs that we need to take advantage of? Many DBs now have spatial data types, which didn't used to be the case. So the SGID is available in SQL Server, the ESRI Hub, PostGIS, and we hope to do a couple other things. We have a lot of scripts that run every night that move data around to these different places. And it seems like now more and more, another big plus for all this is that executive folks seem to be more GIS savvy these days. I seem to definitely spend less time explaining GIS to people, more just, I mention it, they give me examples, and then we're able to have a good conversation about it. So, Greg, I'm afraid we've come to the end of the show. Thanks everyone for watching. I put our website out there, Greg's email, my email. Don't forget to check out our geospatial podcast, Utah Geospatial Podcast, that you can find wherever you get your podcasts. Greg, do you have anything in closing you want to say?
No, I'd say thanks for listening to us. And if you listen to us ramble, then I think you will enjoy the Utah Geospatial Podcast. But just kidding. Actually, we try to get, folks from around the state to talk and speak up, and we prod them with questions, and we try to make it entertaining to see, how is GIS being used around the state, and what are you doing with it, and how did you get there? And so I think it's a pretty entertaining podcast. So check that out if you're bored.
Okay. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks for listening. Bye.